Alright guys, that's Scrappy again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far, and what a return to the Major 2 qualifier. Some serious results tonight, some 3-0s across the board, some of which to the favourite team, others of which that was not the case at all. OpTic get the job done, FaZe absolutely do not, and we'll certainly talk about that, but Toronto, do they need to be on the verge of a change after what the Ravens did to them this evening? Loads of talking points. If I want to Twitter your thoughts in a comment, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Kenny is back on the timeline. He was watching this evening's games. He was talking a little bit about what next for him, of course, after the stint on the Thieves. He's contemplating calling it a day, but he still wants to compete. He's still got that competitive drive. He feels like he's pretty good at this game. He might decide to give it one more go. Of course, last year had the difficult stints. Difficult is probably an understatement on OpTic last year. He gets the opportunity on Rocker, and he was okay. He at least revived his individual level a little bit, but of course it was not enough, you would have thought. Then he got the Thieves opportunity due to various reasons. Should he decide to come back? Look, he's not going to play challenges, but he says, I'm still questioning what I plan to do. He did talk about coaching a little bit. Would Kenny be a good coach? Look, I think he could be a very valuable coach. Would he have the patience for it? That I think is a somewhat different conversation. Now, he also did say there was an option on the table. As he says, not a lot of teams making changes, although after tonight, you've got to wonder if another team might really need to join that conversation. Kenny does say that, yeah, Cloud9 was an option. If he wanted to go and play for Cloud9 and take the 24k or whatever annualized, he could have done, but I think understandably Kenny decided for now that probably isn't the best opportunity. Look, if Kenny wants to join Cloud9 at any point, he can probably get on the phone and make it happen, right? So that opportunity is probably still out there. The question is, will anyone else be picking him up anytime soon if he wants to come back, if it's a team that makes some degree of sense? Zinni is also talking about the state of affairs down on the Huntsman. He says their trialling with Dimensions went well. They're trialling Cal as well. Of course, Renegade, Raspi not going anywhere. O'Johnny's joins the team as well. Doug says W Dimensions. Of course, he also mentions Kips, because Kips could still come back, but he says still waiting for more info on that before we move forward, because the rumour has been that Kips could be on his way to Toronto, potentially on the bench, or maybe something more than that, especially based on what we saw tonight. There's also a Falcons x Stallions team, which has been rumoured at the moment. Of course, Swooty seemingly will be staying a part of that conversation, but let's talk about the matches of today. First of all, I thought this was really cool to see Hex after the birth of Scump's newborn son, who was born, I think, on the 29th of January or something. He's about 2 weeks old at this point, and he's only been alive for a couple of weeks, but he has already secured the OpTic ring, or like the OpTic chain, right? So you can see that Hex put together, I think there's a zoom in on this in a second, Hex put together this very small chain that baby Jack, OpTic Jack, will have around his neck in the near future. So thought that was really nice to see. But OpTic themselves, they did Scump justice today, that is for sure. Wasn't the cleanest series of all time. It's what we're talking about when it comes down to scrims, because I think in many respects that is kind of what these matches are, at least for the top teams on paper, but they are still very relevant, right? And you've got to understand, they're playing like 6 weeks of qualifiers here. If you're struggling for 6 weeks of qualifiers, your mental is going to be compromised going into the major, and your roster might need to blow it up as well. So the online stuff matters arguably way more than it should, and you can debate how relevant it really is going to LAN, but it's certainly important, right? Whether it really does a great job indicating how the teams will perform on LAN, that is a different conversation. Certainly we saw that during the course of Major 1. But it is very clear that if you're struggling online, it has implications, not just for your team morale, but of course also for the standings, where you're going to be in the bracket. And for Birmingham, that's especially true. The bottom 2 teams after these qualifiers don't even go to the event. If you're top 6, you guarantee winners. That's about it. Boston pulled looked like they were going to pull a little bit of a comeback for a short amount of time. Then OpTic really put that one to bed. Mercules just did the job. I mean, it's like the consistency of this guy is pretty outrageous. especially because there was quite a bit of talk about his scrim performance yesterday against the Thieves. He wasn't having the best time of it. Comes out today, business as usual, drops a 1.4. I think especially Mercules in Search and Destroy, he might be the best search player that we've ever seen. I know that's a pretty outrageous statement to make, and it's very early in his career, but his Search and Destroy numbers, Mercules, since joining the league, are absolutely ridiculous. I'll probably bring them up on screen for you guys here in a second so we can look through his cards and his Search and Destroy numbers. But it is ridiculous. He's averaging in Search Mercules, since joining the Pro League in the middle of last year, a 1.36 KD. That is his Search KD so far. And every stage, he seems to just be unreal at Surge. The decision-making, everything is usually on point. It's been such a benefit for OpTic, right? It used to be, they might win the game one, they might lose the game one, but often OpTic, especially in these online games, where they would get caught out is if they'd lose the game to Surge. That just doesn't happen much anymore. Not to say that OpTic are flawless in the mode. Of course, it was their big downfall at the Major, where they lost to the Gentlemates. I think Huke still has a bit of work to do. It's maybe not entirely his fault, but there's certainly, you know, again, this map wasn't great for Huke. His search so far this year is sitting at something like a 0.7. It's not great. Questions on, you know, how the bomb should be handled and planted and all these other things. Huke didn't do much this map, but at the end of the day, it didn't massively matter. The other guys take over. So still some work for OpTic to think about there, the way they get all of the cylinders on their team firing. But then we go to the game 3 on the Overload. Huke had a few nice moments here, and Boston go down. So Boston, unfortunately, I think this is a result that could be expected. This particular matchup just has never suited Boston. They tend to just get slammed by OpTic, playing them last year, playing them this year. I don't know, partly I think it's a mental thing as well, but I also think there's a component that's just not good enough at the moment. And Boston, could they have made a change? Look, the roster lock doesn't really exist in the same way anymore. If they want to blow it up, they can do it right now. Maybe another team will consider that this evening as well. But should they have made a change going into this run? Again, they've been 3-0'd by OpTic. It kind of is what it is. But again, the performance is such that you could certainly justify a conversation around making some moves on that team. OpTic advanced to be the only team with a positive win-loss record on every mode. I think some may still be tied in certain modes, but look, OpTic starting off to a certain extent where they left off last season. Dashy had a slow start to the game 1, then he really got going at some point, but that is a consistent trend at this point, it's got to be said, for Dashy in recent times. The game 2, Merc was 8-3, and Shotzzy was probably the key player that map in some respects, but Merc just does it again. And then on the final map, Dashy did finally turn up in the map. Cammy has a 0.7, effectively, not a pretty series. I think there is a good argument here that you say, Nasty, you've got the keys. I don't think Snoopy should be going anywhere either, but maybe Boston missed their chance. I mean, they can still make a change. Not too many other teams have made radical changes, but as the challengers teams are still forming, there could be some conversations here to be had. I will, given I was mentioning Mercules Search and Destroy numbers, I mean, look at this. He's at a 1.52 KD this season so far. And just if you look at his player cards, look at these search numbers. Major 1 this year, 1.48. His last year's season card oval was a 1.28, best of anyone. Purple kills per rounds. Even the launch invitational that he played recently, he had a 1.6 in that. At the World Cup last year, he had a 1.68. Like, you're struggling to find a card. Okay, his first major performance at Major 3, he had a 1.02. And then after that at Major 4, he had a 1.18. Since then, his search has been 1.5, 1.7, 1.3, 1.6, 1.5, and he's starting off this stage with, what, a 2.6 or something? So it is pretty outrageous at this point, I'm not going to lie. And, well, Mercules has done it again. However, not in many respects the key talking point of the day, because Ravens, they played Toronto. Now, Ravens, they got slammed when they turned up to land. The question was, would the Royal Routers, as some are calling them, be back in business in the online domain? That is true to an extent, but I also think this is probably more of a conversation around Toronto because, yeah, Ravens might be nice in an online domain. Sure, give them their flowers. They're undefeated online, as we know. but you can't be getting 3-0'd by them. That is a simple bottom line. They lose the game 1 by getting a major comeback on, which was bad. And then game 2, I mean, they were pretty lost, to be honest. We've got Exceed here popping a collateral, picking up the 3rd onto Insight as well, ripping him off the head glitch as Ravens take a comfortable map 2. And before we know it, they're getting bent over again. Octane says, how arse is Toronto Koi? We now know the answer. 250-202 on the exposure after a big comeback. I mean, you know, you can't be losing from there, really, especially when they just fell flat towards the end of the map. CleanX, 1.5. Again, they've tried a couple of things in terms of roles and all that on the team. ReeaL just continues to get slammed. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's got to be tough mentally to deal with this. He's got a 0.7 game 1. He goes 1 in 7 game 2. Green carpet on the side of the Ravens. And then, yeah, maybe a bit of a bounce back, but Insight had a rough one here. So did Lurqxx, Nero takeover. You know, Nero's always good for at least one takeover map, certainly online, and frankly, this one was the entire series. Nero drops a 1.6, Insight with a 0.7, JoeDeceives with an uncharacteristic 0.8, but it's gonna happen eventually. ReeaL with a 0.8, they get 3-0 slammed out of the server. They're now on a 6-series loss streak, Toronto. Their run has not been pretty at all. And yeah, they did play some pretty solid teams for a time. You know, they lost to Ravens before, even that one. They only lost 3-1 there. Then they lost to Gentlemates. You know, they'd beaten Thieves before that. So you kind of look back at that win against Thieves and you say, okay, you know, maybe there's some potential. But since then, they've lost everything. And the loss today against Ravens could be the straw that broke the camel's back in some respects, because they decided to stick it out after the major, but coming in and getting 3-0'd by Ravens, I can't imagine the vibes and the confidence in that camp is especially high, and usually that only precedes one thing. Toronto now have lost 6 in a row, which is the worst ever for Ultra, Toronto Koi, Ultra, whatever you want to say. They start the season 3-7, their worst ever start to a year. Joe says, yee, lost 3-0 to Ravens, play FaZe tomorrow. So, yeah, he's got to be going through it right now. We shall see what they decide to do. Nameless says it might be time to blow it up. Formal was giving Nero his gas for tucking Koi towards the end of that game. And Adam Adamu, the CEO over there, says, not satisfied with where we are. Make no mistake, everything is under review. We'll do what it takes to get back to where we should be. Nothing more to say until there is something to say. And, well, looks like there might be something to say very soon indeed. The final series was fascinating. FaZe top 3 at the major. They're coming against Miami, a team that's been pretty good online, and Miami were pretty good at the major as well, but I wasn't really sure where to place them because their online run wasn't so good. It felt like they were making some progress with Traixx, but still it was kind of difficult to think they would be as good as they were with ReeaL last year. But game 1, Simp goes double negative. You're very rarely gonna see that. 14 in 28 from Simp, wasn't really doing anything on the map at all, and Heretics run away with it. You're thinking, wow, okay, that was a shocker. Maybe FaZe are gonna bounce back in the game too. Even with Metal sticking his own teammate here, I'm pretty sure they still won this round. It goes to around 11, and it was such a confusing turn of events to get here, because this was a 4v2 for Heretics. They squandered the advantage, it became a 2v2, and it looked like FaZe were actually going to win it, but then Heretics won it anyway. They took this map in round 11 fashion, and then we go to a overload, and within 20 seconds, FaZe are already down 1-0. They've gone 4 dead, they're already down 1-0. It eventually went to an overtime, it was tied 3-3, and FaZe lose that one as well. So, look, it's online COD, take it as you will. FaZe, obviously on LAN, they could have won that event, right? They were 1 round away, 4 rounds away, I mean 1 round on 4 occasions from beating Gentlemates to get to the grand finals. Who knows what would have happened there against OpTic. But when 04 has a bad map and Simp also doesn't have a good map, they will get beaten by kind of anyone, and well, Heretics prove that they are still a force to be reckoned with. So fascinating developments on the first day here. I mean, FaZe to get 3-0'd was really not on my agenda. Super has a 1.7, Traixx with one of his first like really impressive series of the season so far, and we've got Drazah, Simp and 04 all in the 0.7s, which is remarkable. You're not going to see that too often. I imagine FaZe will bounce back. I don't think they need to blow it up or anything, but certainly a bit of a wake-up call to say, okay, you guys need to lock in, because as I say, these qualifiers, as much as I don't like online cards, they are incredibly important. And, well, they've got that new sponsor who says, when FaZe win, you win. Well, you'll have to wait a little bit longer for that. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.